what's going on, guys? It's Matt 10, your host here. So what I've got for you today is my Madden 2019 sliders. I've been playing Madden for years upon years, and primarily part of Madden Mania at the time, and then Operation Sports here for I don't know how long it's been. I joined in 2006. So Madden's been a big part of my life. It allowed me to follow football and learn players as I lived overseas, and I didn't really know too much about certain players and the league in general. And so I've really, of course, grown to love football in general. I'm a big Chiefs fan, Kansas City Chiefs. I just wanted to provide my sliders here. Of course, you guys know I'm all about realism, always about improving the game, making it as realistic as possible. And of course, I've got a thread on Operation Sports in which I go into my philosophy, my approach, and that's what I'm going to do in this video here, guys. First off, I want to let you know I don't test in Play Now, and so in any exhibitions I don't test in that at all. I have used it to combine my idea between the exhibition and the franchise, and I feel like they're polar opposites, and so I don't test in that, and I don't test in practice mode. I purely put in the sliders on the main menu, and then I go into the franchise and import them. So I'm going to go over the specific values, the difficulties that I use, and just go from there. And of course, I use the same concept of a home game is going to use the All-Pro difficulty, and away games is going to use All Madden difficulty. So you're going to see that there's no change in slider values between if you use All-Pro, if you use All Madden. And this is just something I like to take with EA Sports games. I do the same with FIFA, where I use World Class for home matches and Legendary for away matches. Going into the slider set here, first off, like I said, difficulty, skill level between All Pro and All Madden. There have been some guys that said that Pro works as well, so I would say Pro to All Madden, but I personally go All Pro to All Madden. Now the game style is simulation, and then quarter length is 9 minutes. I have the accelerated clock off. Injuries at 13. This is just a value I've stuck with. If anything that hasn't changed between the 23 versions I mentioned is this value. It stayed at 13 for a while, and there's a good amount of injuries in game, out of season injuries. It's really a solid one. I haven't seen any reason to change this. Fatigue is a new thing I've done with this version, where I've always used as 50 or under 50. But recently, with trying to get the separation to be less super separated, considering the threshold I use or the speed parity scale, I found that fatigue at 52 is a nice balance. You get to see a lot of just variety, from the quarterback missing a wide open receiver to a penalty on the goal line or something like that. It just brings in another layer to the game of Madden 19, which is really a great game as a base. And so adjusting this value has been really good for me, and it's kind of what made everything click. Player speed parity scale, which is another word for threshold. I've changed this a couple times. I originally started this at a fairly low threshold. I like lower thresholds. I feel like it separates players out, not just in speed, but also in physics and how they separate. They become separate entities, so to speak, and that allows just more dynamic play. But it does, especially in Madden, it does open things up a lot more. So found a nice balance here, paired with the fatigue at 45. This is just enough where the really fast players will get away from the defenders, and it's also just enough that the coverage is going to be solid and there's going to be recognition to the play at hand, etc. So 45 complements the fatigue at 52 quite well. And just a real quick word on penalties. There's talk, of course, amongst the forum members, and I'm part of this crew as well, about penalties affecting gameplay. I 100% believe that they do. Early on in my versions, some of my earliest ones was pretty much the base was using penalties to create the sliders and then building those sliders to complement them. And there's so many values, and you bring in so many more variables when you adjust penalties. But as I, added on to the thread, receiving feedback, I always felt like I had to trust but verify with people. I always felt like I had to ask them, "Oh, are you sure you have face mask at 45 and not 55?" Or, there's just another layer. And if you import sliders, or you download the sliders, the penalties don't come along with them. So it became very tedious to try to verify this information and verify if people are using this setup exactly as I've tested. And so I figured, you know what, let's just forget about the penalties, and I'll let people adjust as they want. Just remember that they're not going to experience possibly the same thing, and it's going to be tough for me to troubleshoot if they have issues, if they make certain adjustments to penalties, because they really do impact gameplay. And so I've left them completely alone, so that way you can apply the slider set to whatever set of penalties that you want to work with. But just buyer beware, so to speak. You'll just have to know that anything you adjust on the penalty side is going to affect the gameplay side of things. Alright, so now we're in the player skill sliders and then the computer sliders. Now, I don't really need to show the computer skill sliders because technically I've actually made them the same as the player skill. So they're, QB accuracy is 40 for both. Every value is the same. Which I think is a little different than most slider sets out there, but my goal is always to kind of allow both to be the same and then let the difficulty value, make that little adjustment. So like I said, with that all pro for home games and then that all Madden for away games, there's that extra sense of possibly a little better performance from the home side because you're facing against an all Madden CPU. So keeping it as simple as possible that way has really allowed the game to really just be fresh and kind of bring a good challenge overall. So my approach here is keeping everything the same with the user and the computer. So for QB accuracy, the goal here is to still allow outstanding quarterbacks to stand out, of course, to also have the certain type of zip on the ball for the ball physics, but also with that increase in fatigue, it also brings in that sense of variety, the random, terrible throws from the quarterback because they've they scrambled for 15 yards and now they're kind of tired and they're not going to make a very accurate run or accurate throw on the run or something like that, unless they're Patrick Mahomes, of course. So that's been a good value here. It's also affects how the quarterback is going to move in the pocket. So if you go too low, you'll see them kind of stand in the pocket, run side to side, and then get sacked. I found that this is a good balance between them stepping up in the pocket, deciding to scramble, or staying in the pocket and throwing the ball away, or you're kind of finding a check down receiver. Next is pass blocking. Pass blocking is at 30. Pretty low value considering where I've had it before. Now, I like pass blocking at 30 because 25 honestly will be a sack all day, especially on play action passes. Now, at 30, you get a good balance between the chance of a sack, but also still well blocked by the offensive lineman or tight end or fullback, running back, etc. But it does limit, of course, when you do a play action, you definitely are more pressed for time. But this also brings in that element of the offensive line and defensive line interaction to kind of happen a lot more organically. You're not just seeing patty cake going about where the offensive lineman's just, pushing the defensive lineman just statically. Next is receiver catching, wide receiver catching at 40. Simply, if you go too high, you're going to see a lot of passes completed. You're going to see the same type of catch animations. See a lot of the one-handed catch. which is just rare in general, and it shouldn't happen as much as it does here on Madden, but it is Madden. So, but the receiver catching at 40 allows enough enough chances for the receiver to still make the play, but also to maintain control and stay down with the ball. But if it's in tight windows, then it's going to be really tough for them to hold on to the ball, depending on their rating for the catch and traffic rating. So a good balance here between those drops that are wide open and they're trying to run before catching the ball. There's just a lot of good variety, and this is overall a solid balance for what I'm looking for. Run blocking at 25 is because the recent patch update really made the computer such a force on the ground, and also a little easy for the user to run on the ground. Early on in Madden 19, the computer was completely terrible at running the ball. I think I spent the majority of my time on sliders to try to get a decent direct running style from the computer. Finally, they fixed it, but of course, in EA fashion, they overcompensate, and they made things very, what I call sticky, kind of, suction blocking. The run blocking at 25 brings in exactly what we're looking for. It puts a sense of urgency for the running back as well to get past the line of scrimmage and get into first down, try to get into the first down, or just try to push the ball forward as much as they can. Fumbles at 50, this value still is one I'm not 100% sure on, to be honest with you. I've had this moved all over the place, and the initial thought was that fumbles was really going to make that direct run. I would say in previous versions of Madden 19, it did control how the running back would run with the ball in terms of directness, but I think run blocking controls that a lot more this update. And so fumbles at 50, I've just kept it simple because I had it at 52. I even had it at 48. I haven't seen much of a difference, to be honest, other than the fact, literally, for fumbles happening. Reaction time, it's mainly defensive player swats, right? And how quickly they're going to react to the ball in the air. I don't want any psycho or psychic defensive backs or linebackers, etc. But I do want them to react if they see the ball or if they see the receiver about to catch the ball. And I need to see that handout. It's a big thing about what I'm looking for. I want those pass deflections. Interceptions at 35. The key with interceptions, it has to be below the reaction time. So 35 is perfect. To me, it allows enough where the defensive backs and linebackers, etc., will still have brick hands, but not so much that every interception is automatic, and not that they're going to miss interceptions all the time. You throw a ball over the middle on a slant play, and the linebackers there covering, there's a good chance it'll get intercepted if you depending on how you throw that, high, low, etc., or if you loft it up there. You should be punished. In the NFL, you will be punished. Pass coverage at 50. This is a value that is so relative to the threshold you choose that I could go into another video on my theory between pass coverage, actually these three values, but mainly pass coverage and threshold, where pass coverage is the balance between man coverage and zone coverage. So at 50, we just get that kind of nice balance between the two, and we're going to let the threshold, we're going to let the fatigue and the receiver catching and the QB accuracy, we're going to let those elements play and let the pass coverage dictate itself to kind of not be canceled out, but basically not get in the way. Because this is a value I spent so much time on, to be honest with you. And I just got tired of playing with it. And I said, I'm going to find the threshold, and I'm going to find those other values, and then I'm going to mess with it. And I did, and I really didn't see the need to mess with it as I got everything else kind of sorted out. And next is rush defense. Now, this only has one value, which is tackling. Of course, tackling, is basically my biggest pet peeve with tackling on Madden by default is how many wrestling type of tackles there are. It's body slams, it's clotheslines, etc. So I like it lower than 50, and I had this under 40 even for the longest time, because I want to see more wrap-up tackling, more gang tackling. So eventually, though, as the running backs got stronger, with the updates and more direct, they started breaking tackles a lot easier. Same with receivers. It just made the game wide open, essentially. And so I decided to raise tackling, and this is probably the highest I've had it. I do like it at 42 as well, but there is that animation that occurs with the wrestling tackles and clotheslines and body slams, etc. So 41, I like that value. It's a very kind of arbitrary number, but I do like it here because I haven't seen those animations as much. It's not to say they don't pop up. I do see the body slam occasionally, but it's warranted in a sense. The main thing I want to see is gang tackling. I want to see those assisted tackles and those attempts for solo tackles, and then a player, teammate finishing the tackle off. So that's what I really want to see. I love the animations that come out. And I can't say out of replay, honestly, on some of the type of tackles I've seen in this game. So 41 is where I'm at, and I'm very happy with it. So field goal power, you're probably wondering, 55, that's pretty substantial. The main thing, as I don't know if I've ever broadcast this on the channel, but I did try to be a kicker once, a couple years ago as semi-professional. Didn't get paid for it, but semi-pro nonetheless. And it was for arena football, but outdoors. And I tried it. I was not great. And so I had a lot of respect for kickers, because the number one thing with kicking is height. And in Madden and also NCAA, they seem to forget that. They seem to think that every kick will never go above the goalpost. It seems to just go mid-height. And so, as I've done in NCAA, I say increase the field goal power, lower the field goal accuracy. That balance between the two is going to create a kind of more oomph into it, more power into the strike, but also can be wild depending on, of course, the ratings of the player, of the kicker. So I really like the field goal power 55. You are going to see some 54, 58, even I saw a 62-yarder, because it happens in the NFL in real life. So 55 has been a really good value. Punt power at 48, I just felt like they kicked the ball too far, and really the punt accuracy could go down lower, but my problem with punt accuracy is if you go too low, you get these 10-yard kicks or 15-yard kicks sometimes, and it just isn't realistic. There's no wind or anything like that. It's just kind of a shank, and there's too much that can happen there, and of course we know football is all about field position, and so I didn't want to go too low on the punt accuracy value, and so punt power did get a drop because I felt like they were kicking into the end zone or very precisely, on the 1 yard line at times. It's very strange, and I will tell you the accuracy still is probably too accurate, especially on all Madden. You see that backspin on the ball as soon as it hits the ground a little too often for my liking. But again, like I said, I don't want to see the 10-yard punts and 15-yard punts because that happens too often when you do modify this too much. So kickoff power lastly is at 48. Really, they're going to kick the ball out of the end zone or pretty close to it. This brings in that variety that, hey, maybe they'll miss-hit the kick. Like I said, as a former kicker, I have a lot of respect for kickers because, I didn't have that strong of a leg despite my soccer background. It takes a lot more than just power. It takes a lot of flexibility in how high you can get your leg, and that's something I couldn't really accomplish. And so that brings in so much more variety of what can happen when you kick that ball, and if it's going to go out of the end zone or stay in the end zone. And we all like to see some kick returns. I still haven't conceded or haven't had one kick return for a touchdown. So this isn't a value that affects too much in that regard. All right, so once I've got the sliders created in the settings there. Now I just go to my franchise. Once you get to the main screen, you'll just go all the way to the right into options, scroll down to gameplay sliders, and then just hit Y for import custom sliders there, and it'll just grab them. And then there you go. You've got the sliders, and the nice thing is it includes the penalties as well. And so that is pretty much it, guys. I want to thank you for watching this video, and hopefully you get to try out the sliders if you like Madden 19. If you want me to maybe do a franchise video with highlights, etc., I've never done that before on this channel, but I'd love to, especially to kind of show off the sliders and enjoy them as as much as I can. Let me know in the comments below what team you think I should use. I won't use the Chiefs because I don't want to give them any bad luck by playing either too good or too bad, depending on how they're doing this year. Of course, this year they're doing fantastic, so naturally I don't want to use them. But let me know in the comments below what you thought about the sliders when you tried them out, and what team I should use for a franchise. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, take care and stay tuned.